Well, hi there. Beautiful day outside. I've been sitting outside for a while. Just a beautiful sunny day. I'm just here in my living room. Uh, my kitty, Mr. Puss, was just behind me. I thought he was going to be, as a backdrop, but I just see he just jumped off the sofa here. Never mind. He comes and goes as he wants. After all, he owns his house. Suzanne and I are only his tenants here. Anyways, well, you all know that I've seen so much of the world in my concert travels and others. I've played in 100 countries, but I've been to more than 100 countries. And yes, I do have a couple favorite places that I have been to when people ask me. But I sometimes will answer that question from the other direction and say, there is no place that I would not want to go to again. Every place has something to offer, landscape, climate, whatever. And people are people. Whatever the politics of the government might be, people are still people. And in most places, as they say, if you smile at them, they will smile back at you. So I really urge all of you, if you ever have a chance, to see more of the world if you can. You can't see everything in one go, but see what you can when you can. It broadens the mind. It really enhances your life experience. Anyways, that's like a little preface, if you want to call it. I want to focus on kind of interesting experiences I had in one particular country that I have played concerts in and been to actually, I would say, at least 5 times. And it's an unusual place around the world. It's an example of a place that you think, well, are there any people who actually enjoy or would go to a classical concert? My answer is most every place has some people who would do it. It's up to the local organizers or local organization to make that happen, but there are people almost everywhere. What I'm talking about is a couple of interesting experiences that I had, actually 3 separate times. And this is in the Sultanate of Brunei. If some of you don't know where Brunei is in Southeast Asia. It's on the island of Borneo, big island. It's actually the 3rd largest island in the world. Borneo. In the old days, Borneo had a reputation, and rightly so, of having tribes that were headhunters, especially Dayaks, who are also called Ibans. And even to this very day, you can find shrunken heads in some museums and collections there. Yes, that was true, centuries ago. Well, Borneo is a big island, and it's actually divided into 3 parts, or 3 political parts. You'll have the Sultanate of Brunei, which is a small country. It's in kind of the northern part, northeast part of the island. On one side, it's surrounded by the state of Sabah, that's S-A-B-A-H, which is part of Malaysia, East Malaysia. And on the other side, another state of Malaysia called Sarawak. Now, I've played in both Sabah and Sarawak. The southern part of Borneo, which is the greater part, is a very primitive area, still vast jungles, wildlife of all kinds, crocodiles, and that famous ape, the orangutan, and that's called Kalimantan. It's part of Indonesia. Now that orangutan, that's a Malay word. Actually, it's 2 words. It's orang utan, which means literally jungle man in the Malay language. That's where that orangutan comes from, but they're on the island of Borneo. Okay, I'm just giving you a little bit of synopsis of what the island itself is. But Brunei is in the north, it's a small political entity. It was a British protectorate from about 1888 until 1984, when Brunei became independent. It's ruled by a sultan. Hassan al-Bolkiah is his name, the current sultan. He's relatively young still. And until recently, he was really the Elon Musk of his time. He was the richest man in the world. And why? Because of oil and gas, which is offshore there. The Brunei government and the Dutch Shell oil company, they have a kind of a joint venture into extracting that oil. He was the richest man in the world. Actually, there are 2 things in Brunei which are in the Guinness Book of Records. His palace, for one. It's called the Istana. It's actually a palace complex. It's the world's largest palace. And below it, actually, on the lower level, you see the world's largest kampong. What's a kampong? You'll find these in Southeast Asia. These are water villages. They're kind of on stilts, they come out of the water and these piers and so on to interconnect them. So you have that. It's supposed to be the world's largest kampong. And I remember when being there that you could actually take a picture like both of them on one shot, one above the other. Two Guinness Book of Records items in one camera shot. That's all, in Brunei. Okay. Now, I've been to Brunei about 5 times, and I came for the first time. Actually, I was thinking about the other day. My gosh, I think it was 1975, 50 years ago. First time that I came there, and I remember that when I arrived there, and my plane was taxiing to the terminal, I remember looking out my window and I saw a ceremony going on in the middle of the airfield. What I found out later, it was the British Governor General who was leaving, the one who had been there. His term was up, and there was, all these people were standing on the tarmac, and he was leaving. Later, I found out he was quite active in the music society there. I mean, I remember his name, Peter Gautry, I remember as his name. Well, that was just going on the very, very day that I arrived. Okay, so I played about 5 times in Brunei, and there are only 2 places to play. You have the capital city or town. It's called Bandar Seri Begawan. Bandar is the Malay word for town. Seri Begawan is the name of the present Sultan's father, so it's named after him. Bandar Seri Begawan, or they all refer to it as BSB. And there's a small town called Seria, Seria, about 50 miles away, and the Shell Oil Company has a drilling operation there, and there's a clubhouse there. I remember the Panaga Club, and I played there. So BSB, and that's about the only 2 places you can play when there. Okay. I remember, it says being there, that there was I met at one point in the early years, there was a local music teacher. She was not from Brunei. She was actually from, as she told me, well, at that time, from the former Yugoslavia. She was probably either Bosniak from Kosovo or from Bosnia. She was a Muslim, but a European Muslim, this woman, and she was a local music teacher. And I remember at one point, she told me she was teaching the son of one of the brothers of the Sultan. And she wanted me to say something to this kid because he was a teenager. He didn't practice really like he should. And she thought that if I said a few words, maybe that might kind of fire him up. And so the Sultan's brother lived in another palace on the Istana grounds. Remember, that's the name of that complex. And I remember going with her, and I heard this kid, he played, I don't know what he played now. He played a little something. I remember that the piano had a broken key that didn't work. And I guess I said a few things to him to kind of give him a pep talk. He must have been about 15 years old or something at that time. And then after that was over, his sister, Princess, came into the room. She may have been 12 or something. And she was carrying a tray of cookies or something and tea. And she also gave me an envelope with money. I didn't expect that I was going to be paid for this, So it was a kind of a nice little gesture that I thought was nice, at that time. So we went to this other palace on the Istana grounds so that I heard the Sultan's brother's son. Okay, this is all sort of backdrop to what I'm leading into here, okay? Because later on, in my last 3 performances there, and I think it must have changed, since my early times there that this thing occurred, because I never had this experience anywhere else at all. Anyone who plays a concert in Brunei has to go through a little process. That's like a censorship. It's called like a censorship thing. There's a local music society. It's called the Brunei Music Society. Okay. Now, who are the members? The members are the expat Europeans who live there, the Brits, the the Dutch people, other Europeans, from the Indian community and from the Chinese community. They're the ones who are members, and they're the ones who come to the concerts. The local Muslims don't. I mean, it's not their music, okay? It's not their music, so that's okay. But still, anyone who plays a public concert has to go to this so-called censorship thing where you play as part of your program, like a synopsis of your program, for a committee of local Muslims. They're not musicians. They don't know diddly squat, what you're playing. I could name anything, they wouldn't know the difference or anything like that. But you have to do it. So you give them the program. There are about 6 to 8 of them. And yes, and there are a couple of women as part of it. It's all very low key. It's all very friendly. It lasts maybe 15 to 20 minutes at the most, and you sit down and you give them the program and say, and they'll say, okay, what would you like to start with? And you start with whatever you want. They're not just listening to what you're playing. They're also, I think, watching your deportment. Are you making suggestive movements, something that's obscene or something? They're looking at you in a total sense. So it's not just what you're playing. But they don't know what pieces. I remember on one of those times, I said I was going to start with the Beethoven Appassionata Sonata, the F minor, Opus 57. So I played a little part of the first movement. At one point I just stopped and I said, well, it just kind of goes on and on this way. And that was fine with them. I just gave a little synopsis. It was the end of that. I didn't have to play the whole thing, and so I just kind of stopped. I remember the first time in the first concert, there was one item in my program. It was one of the biggest and most brilliant Liszt operatic paraphrases. Very seldom played now, but when it first came out in the 1830s, it caused more commotion than any other piano piece ever did at its first performances, because the public in Paris went absolutely wild over this thing, and Liszt had to play it over and over again. It's called Reminiscences of Robert le Diable, which is an opera by the bel canto composer Jacopo Meyerbeer. Just had made this a huge hit. So I was playing it in the program. Someone on the committee told me, we might have a problem with this, Steve, because in the title, Robert le Diable, Robert the Devil. That word devil might be a red flag to someone. Devil. Well, I already anticipated that, and I told them, listen, if they ask me something about this, I'm going to mangle the pronunciation. I'm going to say, oh, it's part of his name, Robert le Diablo, or I was just going to mangle it or something like that. But it never came up. But I could see where there was a potential possibility of doing that. Okay, that was the first time. The second time, a year or two later, when I came the next, after that, I remember in my program, I had that lovely Debussy prelude, which is from book 1. There are 24 Debussy preludes in 2 sets, in book 1, book 2. It's number 10 in the first book. La Cathédrale Angleterre, the sunken cathedral. Someone from the committee actually did come up to me and say, what's this cathedral? What does this word cathedral mean here? And I said, and I didn't lie, I said the truth. I said, it's an old legend, about, some cathedral off the coast of Brittany in France that sank below the sea and then rose up gloriously, which is true, which is the story of that. So we kind of, but see, the question did come up because the word cathedral was this. What's this? Okay, so that's how that was dealt with. The third time, I had in my program the very effective, the Horowitz transcription of Mussorgsky's famous work, Pictures in Exhibition, which, by the way, I'm gonna bring back later this year at some point. It's hugely effective, really, and it's a number of short pieces that have various titles that make up that whole collection. But there is one which is called Samuel Goldenberg and Shmuel. It's between a rich Polish Jew and a poor one, Samuel. And I thought, Polish Jews, this could bring up some issue there. So I foresaw that in case, and before I gave him the program, I changed the name. I said Dialogue of Two Men. I just didn't want any question if they're going to say something about Jews, So I just changed that, and it was Dialogue of Two Men, It's all silly. It's all low key. Oh, they applauded. Everything was fine. They loved me doing this thing and all that. And here's the irony of it all. Yes, of course they passed, what I did. But you know what? They passed it a day or two after I played the concert, because the concert was the next day. It took them about a day or two later to pass. But interesting. I already did the concert. It was all done and everything. But it's only Brunei. I have to check this, but if you go to the website of the Brunei Music Society, I haven't checked this in some years, but it's mentioned there that performer has to go through this censorship thing there. Only in Brunei. I've never had it anywhere else, where I played, A couple others, one or two other little items, as long as we're still on the subject of Brunei, is of course, the local Muslims, they're not allowed to have liquor and so on. But the Westerners who come, it's a little different law with them. but it's not really hard liquor as I recall. So maybe beer or so on. But I remember, when I was there, that a couple of little places that had beer was like it was behind some door which wasn't marked, and it was almost like in the old melodramas where you knocked on the door and said, "Joe sent me," and you open the door and you might have a beer or something, and they would watch for if inspectors came by, they would put these bottles away or something like that. There's a big hotel there. I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It was built by another of the Sultan's brothers, Prince Geoffrey. His name I remember. Very empty hotel, I remember. There was a very nice Italian Fazziola piano there. That's a high-class piano. You very rarely see those Fazioli pianos. I remember that there. But why would businessmen want to come there if you can't relax in the evening and have your normal drinks and everything there? I just remember that hotel being, so empty. Now, since those years, I haven't been to Brunei in a fair number of years now, but I think that some of these things have been tightened by the Sultan since then. So I don't know what the current situation is right now, but it is stricter than it was then. So, well, that's something about Brunei. Now, I just want to kind of just move just a little bit off about playing in other Muslim countries, because I have played in a number of them, and these were virtually all through the U.S. embassies. North and Central Africa and Middle East. Played in Algeria, for instance, through the embassy. I had two recitals. One was in Algiers, the capital, and the other was in Constantine, which is the second city. The big main theaters of the cities, nice sizable audiences. Well, fine. Now, I've been in Constantine. They arranged that I would play a little short program for children in the local children's cancer hospital. I remember, we went there, and so I'm walking towards the building. Someone from the embassy is with me, and of course, I'm thinking, what kind of instrument will they have for me there? And we walk through there. I can see already kids are gathered, and their parents and their nurses, and they're just all gathered and so on. And then we walk in there, and I look to my right, and I said, "Oh, cripey! They brought a keyboard. This is not a piano. It's like what rock bands have." I said, "Oh my gosh, with 65 keys or whatever it's on, and no pedal." And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? I don't know what I can do with this. It's a totally different instrument. Well, I thought real quick, and you stand, there's no pedal, Well, what I decided to do, a very spot on, I played that little Beethoven Furilis, that little bagatelle, that virtually everybody knows, because I could fit it within that small compass. And electronic piano is fine, and I play on them. I was playing on that in Saipan now when I was there, 2 weeks ago. And that's fine, but it has to be with weighted keys, all the 88 keys, and a pedal. The pedal can be like the one on Saipan, can be a sewing machine type pedal, which, I have to have something prop it up or it's going to move all over the place under my foot. But that's okay, you see. But this was a true keyboard, which is not a piano. They thought, oh, well, it has keys. Whatever, it's all the same. At least they didn't ask me to say, we got an accordion here. It's got keys too. Can you do something with that? No, at least they didn't go that far. But I remember, so far as a keyboard's concerned, again on Saipan, this was on another trip years ago at a local high school. I was supposed to play for the students on an electronic, probably the same one that I was, playing on now the last, 2 weeks ago. But it was an electrical problem. It was the kind of thing you played one note and the next note sounded with it. So it was unworkable, not until that was fixed. Well, the only thing that they had available in that high school was a keyboard. Well, having done it in Algeria once, I thought, well, here's students, but I'll try to figure out something I can do with that. But I have to explain to the students, which I did, this is not a piano. The touch is different, has a clattery sound, there's no pedal, and so on. And I just explained that. And I came up with one or two or three short things that I somehow managed on that. But I would never play a true concert on something like that. It's only something like this for students, and only in some real emergency situations. So let's be clear about that. A keyboard is not the same as a true electronic piano. So, okay, that was that. Now, talking about, again, Muslim countries, that was Algeria. I played 3 times in Tunisia through the embassy, and the second 2 times was, actually, it was at what was the former French cathedral. Remember, Tunisia had been a French colony in the old days. The Cathedral Saint-Louis, which was converted into a cultural center. So I did that concert. But my point in bringing that up was that just down the hill from that cathedral, within walking distance, are the ruins of the famous ancient city of Carthage. the rival of Rome at one time, Carthage. It's behind Tunis, the capital of Tunisia. So I walked down there. I don't think there's anyone else was there. I don't recall seeing anyone else, and I just had a chance to walk among the ruins. So Tunisia. Played in Jordan. Played in the West Bank. The Palestinian areas in the West Bank. Was in Jerusalem. Played in Bethlehem at the Peace Center. Played in a Palestinian refugee camp. They had a music school there, so I saw some of that. With some of the barriers, the settlements, and some of the things that you read about in the news. That was my last embassy thing. That was just before the pandemic when I went there. And then I played in Saudi Arabia also. And that was in 1992. Now these days now there have been some liberalizations and loosenings of things, because now I believe there are concerts that are being held, there are sports events and things like that. But and I think even women are allowed to drive now. That they weren't then. But that was still strict then in 1992. I had two recitals. One was at the ambassador's residence, and one was in Riyadh, the capital, and the other one was in Dhahran, another major city, at the consulate. So, but that's our territory. You see, you can invite Saudi guests to come there because they were on our U.S. territory. And I remember that, especially in Riyadh, I remember there were women who came, Saudi women. They were dressed in evening dress, just like everybody else, had drinks, just like everybody, very informal. But when they left, the hijab and the burqa, the coverings, they had to have that all, and they had to have that. And I remember there were a couple of women there who at that time were involved in some protests and had actually been arrested, I think probably for driving without permission or something like that. This was 1992, remember, So, and I remember that, Riyadh, the capital, it was kind of a funny situation. I couldn't get a sense of where's downtown. You had like a clump of, buildings that were a block of buildings. Then you had a space which is kind of desert or semi-desert. Then you had another compound with buildings and so on. And I was looking, where's downtown? I just didn't get a sense of where is downtown in Riyadh. Now Dhahran constructed more like a traditional town. Yeah, that was it. So that was my experience in Saudi Arabia. Oman was another one I had a nice time in. It's next to Saudi Arabia. Even then, some of the call them Islamic laws were more liberal than in Saudi Arabia. I remember, there were hotels, there were tourists, there were women who could lie on the beaches, in their bathing suits and all that. And I had 3 recitals in Oman. One was at the ambassador's residence, one was at the British American School, and the other one was for the police. The Omani police went to their academy. They're all sitting there with their uniforms and caps on, and I'm playing this concert for the police, and it was not kind of an interesting experience in Oman, like that. Bahrain, I played at the Hilton. Turkey, another, of course, Muslim country. Once was Turkey, played at the 2 concerts at the Hilton in Istanbul. And I remember taking a bus to a town called Çanakkale, which is on peninsula in the west, because on that peninsula, on one side, I had a glimpse of that famous battlefield of Gallipoli in World War I, which is so important in Australia and New Zealand history particularly, because they were so involved in it. In fact, the history books say that both of them, especially Australia, came together as a nation the way they are now because of their experience of Gallipoli, And then on the other side of that same peninsula, the ruins of Troy, as in Homer's Iliad. And there's several levels of Troy, because it's a very ancient city and archaeologically there's several. I think it's Troy number 6, which is supposedly the Troy of Homer's Iliad. Well, again, I remember being the only person, it was sort of mid or late afternoon that I went through there, those ruins there. I was the only one there. But of course, almost everywhere you'll find what I call tourist schlock, because there was a kind of a structure, the wooden horse, and there was a sign, wooden horse souvenirs. I said, oh, good God, spare me, you'll find tourist schlock everywhere. But I did get to see, so that's another one was the country. And another one was Azerbaijan, which is in Central Asia, again through the embassy there. Baku is the capital. So I had 3 recitals in Baku, I remember. It's right on the Caspian Sea, so I remember standing on the shores of the Caspian Sea. a lot of construction was going on at that time. There's also oil there, so there's some wealth like that. I remember that, when my mother, as you well know, was a very well-known opera singer in Ukraine, and especially before World War II. But I remember that she told me that among her travels of course, in the then Soviet Union, because Azerbaijan was a Soviet republic, just like Ukraine was, she did perform in Baku. She said she was there also. This must have been in the late 1920s or early 1930s or somewhere like that. She had been in Baku also, in that same thing. So yes, and of course, I when I was still talking about Brunei, I mentioned that I played in Malaysia, of course, not just in those two states on Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak, but in mainland Malaysia as well. Penang and Petaling Jaya, which is near the capital, Kuala Lumpur, for instance. Also played in Indonesia, in Jakarta, where was it? In Malang, on the island of Sumatra, so a couple places in Indonesia as well. I remember though in Malaysia that when I played there, when you get the performance visa, it says not allowed to dance with the audience. Well, okay, that comes, I think, from some rock bands that may have, someone was doing a gyrating and got off the stage and was gyrating with the audience. But actually it says that not permitted to dance with the audience. Well, there you are. So you see, these Muslim countries are all different regarding how performances and other, let's call them Western things, take place. But this censorship thing that I referred to earlier in Brunei, that's the only time. I don't think there's any other country that I ever went through that. But it's all very low-key, very friendly, but they have to hear your little bits of your program, they have to see what it is you're playing, and things like that. So, so I experienced that, and it was interesting. But it's been some years that since I've last been there, so I gotta maybe look into that, write to that Brunei Music Society again and see maybe something can happen next year. We'll see what we'll see. Another thing, still talking about Muslim countries. I haven't played there, but I have been to Egypt and Morocco also, and these were on P&O ships, and been to the pyramids and so. But and actually, Suzanne has also been there too, and I want to just to ask her for a moment to tell you all her experience when we were in Egypt, going from Alexandria to the pyramids. So come on up here and say just a quick word about what the local Egyptians said or looked at,
Oh, it was very simple. We were on the cruise ship, and I think you had sprained your ankle or something, and I went with a couple of the other entertainers off the ship into Alexandria. Well, we went to the big market that was there, and we were walking down it, and here I am. This is when I was in my 20s, so my hair was down, and I'm very blonde, as you can see. And we're walking down the market, and as we were walking, I would occasionally sense someone passing me and then touching my rear end, just like a little brush. And that happened, 3-4 times. And we picked up on it, and then my two fellow entertainers walked behind me because that's where I was vulnerable. And after a moment, we just looked at each other and decided we needed to leave the market, which stopped that entirely. But it was a very strange event. So we walked down this kind of a side street, I guess, and a bunch of jewelry stores were down there. Mm-hmm. And I remember we stopped and we were looking in the window of one of the jewelry stores, and a woman came up to me with her baby in her hand, and she said something to me. Of course, I didn't understand Arabic, it, but she kept pointing to the baby, indicating the baby, and all I could figure is that either she wanted me to take the baby or do something with the baby, or maybe buy a piece of jewelry for the baby. And it was a little odd. But we decided after that it was time to get me out of there, because I was too
Yeah,
much
well.
of a target or a magnet, you know.
Well, with
But
her skin color, she was very
yeah.
exotic looking, to
I
the
mean,
Egyptians too.
I know I'm light now, but I was really blonde with the long hair. And I guess I was a little bit of an oddity at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing was when we were actually in Morocco, that Suzanne was with me on another cruise. I think it was on P&O's Oceania. And we called, well, it was called in Spain, Malaga and Gibraltar, but we were in Casablanca. Now, what I used to do for many years was be a tour escort on shore excursions. Now that means I'm not the guide. There's always a local guide, but I would represent the shore excursion office. I would observe that everything's going to plan. I'd have a little form to fill out, to indicate to the shore excursion office what occurred during the tour. Did we leave on time? Was the driver good? Was the guide clear in explaining this? Any complaints and all that? And I'd get that tour for myself, for free. I used to do a lot of that. I don't do it now. I prefer to be on my own now when I go on shores. Well, Suzanne was with me on that particular one. I was a tour escort for one group, and they put her to work too, to be the tour escort for another group. And I remember they were
I was
behind
on
us.
a different bus.
Yeah. And I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so you saw a bit of Casablanca that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
was it in your group or my group that there was some woman that wandered off or somewhere, and we were trying to get her to find her? Was it in your group? I remember that we were delayed a little bit because there was some woman that sort of wandered away from the group, and it may have been your group that took a little time to find her, and so that we could get back to the ship.
Well, all I had to do was just count heads when
That's
we
right.
got back on the bus.
That's right.
But basically, and report on the trip itself. But
so, anyways, just probably some of the things. So, some of the experiences, in playing in Muslim countries or experiencing something else there, and with Suzanne also experiencing a little bit of that.
That's the closest I got.
Yeah, those are the only two,
countries.
countries that Suzanne experienced in that
Just
sense.
Egypt.
Egypt and Morocco, a little bit.
Morocco.
That's correct. Yeah. So, anyways, there it is. Now I am off on Monday to Alaska, as some of you may know. I'm flying from Cleveland to Denver to Anchorage and then to Nome. I'm going to that remote town of Nome, where I played about a year and a half ago. But I'm doing a residency there for 4 days, where I'm going to do a regular concert. I'm playing for the elementary, middle, and high school students, and also at the local senior citizen center. So it'll be over a 4-day period. That's on the Bering Sea. It definitely is a frontier town. And boy, I'm telling you, that breeze is cold off the Bering Sea when I was there last time. And I'm actually going to take a winter coat this time. It's a family joke that I don't wear a winter coat. But I looked up what the temperature is going to be, for these next week. And it's at or below the freezing point. So I think I better be smart and take a winter coat, which I think I'll do. So I'll be away until the 28th. Then I'll be back. Then I'll probably be playing something else or talk about something else, and you'll hear about whatever else comes up. Well, I hope you enjoyed as the British say, my rabbiting on here. And, as we say in Ukrainian, do slídeću razu, or in Spanish, hasta la próxima, or in German, bis zum nächsten Mal. Till the next time. Have a nice day.